All right, this is Consumer Math. In this video, I will be showing you how to make a tax calculator for federal taxes. This is the first of many videos where I will be using Google Spreadsheets in order to automatically calculate that. This is the spreadsheet that everyone should have been assigned on Google Classroom, and I want to show you the finished product that you should be expecting by the end of this. By the end of this, it should look a lot prettier and it should automatically calculate what taxes you owe on every salary and show the breakdown of how your money is distributed throughout your tax brackets and how much taxes you owe in each of those tax brackets. To demonstrate that this works, I have example 2 pulled from yesterday's lesson where $100,000 resulted with $17,400 in taxes, and I even calculate the rough tax percent that is using a bunch of different tax rates. To prove that this works, I will change this to 20,000. And you can see that 20,000 was example 1 from yesterday, which is also $2,180, and it fills the tax brackets exactly like our last lesson. So how do we make something like this? You're going to start by touching this thing up, and we need to add some categories. So the first category that we want to add is we need to figure out the maximum amount of money in each of these tax brackets. So I'll say that the max money in each bracket. As soon as I hit enter, you'll see that this goes too far and I want it to overflow into the next cell, because when I calculate the max taxes in each bracket, I can spell, there's a C in here, I no longer can see all of the header in column or in D1. In this cell, I need it to overflow. So I'm going to change the text wrapping by selecting D1, coming up here to the text wrapping tool, and I'm going to click on the middle, which means wrap, and it will overflow into the second column, or the second row in that one row, I guess. In E1, I want to do the same thing, but I don't want to go ahead and just click on this button again. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut. I'm assuming you're using a Mac, you're going to hit Command Y. I think Control Y is probably what you do on a Windows machine. Whenever you hit Command Y, it redoes the last option that you did. So if you're doing that to a bunch of things, you could hit Command Y a bunch of times. All right, so we have our headers set up, but you'll notice that the headers up here in columns A, B, and C, they live at the bottom, and I want them to live at the middle. So in order to make everything in row 1 live at the middle, I'm going to click on 1, which selects the entire row. I'm going to come up here to the vertical alignment tool, and I'm going to vertically align it to the middle. And now everything is in the middle. While we're here, I might as well make everything align towards the center as well. There is a keyboard shortcut for these things. Command-Shift-E will make everything go in the middle, and that makes it look much larger. And I also want my header to be bold, so I'm gonna hit Command-B to make everything bold. Now it's looking much better, and I'm ready to move on. So, and before I move on, I do want to talk a little bit about formatting too. Notice that we have a little bit of wasted space. This tax rate, it doesn't have to be so large. I can resize my columns. So if I select column A, I don't even need to select column A, but I need to drag my mouse in between column A and column B. If I have the mouse switch to this cursor, you can see it right here. The cursor is now 2 arrows with a line in between. I can click down, hold down, and drag this, and I can change the column width. If I want to automatically resize the column, I can double click. And if I want to resize columns, all of them automatically, I can select as many columns as I want. I can hit Command A to select everything, or I can just click on the top left in this area right here, which will select everything as well. And I can double click in between the columns and it will resize everything that has text in it. You'll notice that columns F, G, and H have not been resized because there is no text in those. All right, so everything is looking a lot better, and now I can start entering in some data. So in this first bracket, you might be able to automatically calculate this with a calculator or in your head and say, okay, well, the maximum money in this bracket is simply $11,000. I can't add any more money. The maximum between 0 and 11,000, you could just manually type in $11,000. The problem with doing this is it should automatically be able to update when we do our custom tax brackets in a future lesson. Maybe your custom tax bracket has $123 here. In that case, you need this to automatically update cell D2. The way that you make that automatically update is with a formula. But before I do that, I'm going to Command Z that and undo. I'm going to enter my formula. Every single time in Google Sheets that you want to enter a formula, you need to first start by typing the equal to sign. When you type the equal to sign, it says, I'm ready for a function. You can even type in a function like if, sum, anything like that. But I'm going to use this equal to sign so that I can start clicking around. Essentially what I want to do is I want to subtract my upper bound from my lower bound. So I'm going to not type, but simply use my mouse to click cell C2, and it will type in C2 for me. Now I'm going to type in the minus sign on my keyboard because I'm going to subtract my upper bound from my lower bound, and I can just simply select my lower bound. Click, and it will select B2. If I hit enter, you'll notice that the result is $11,000 because 11,000 minus 0 is 11,000. And by default, whenever you enter a formula, it will use the same formatting that the previous two cells have unless there's a mixture of formatting. So just to check to make sure our formula works, I can enter a number like 123, and you can see that it does the math correctly. It does 11,000 minus 123 to get $10,877. I don't want to do that though. I was just checking. Now we're ready to move on. But there's a problem. I need to make sure that I need to spread this formula. Right now, this formula cannot spread down. If I spread this down, by the way, there's 2 or 3 ways of spreading this down. Actually, 4 that I know of. But there's 2 ways in this class that you'll be spreading the formula down. I could simply come over here to this little dot in the bottom right of my cell that I have my formula in, and I could change my cursor to the crosshairs. The type of cursor that you have is really it affects what it will do depending on what you click. For example, right now it's the cursor, which means it's in select. If you hover over the boundaries, it'll change to the hand, which is the move tool. I can move this to a different cell. Command Z, I don't want to do that. Or I could come to this bottom right and change it to the crosshairs, which means it's ready to spread the formula. If you click down and hold down and drag, it will spread a formula down. Unfortunately, these are a little bit off. They're off by $1 because this formula is saying I'm going to subtract my upper bound from my lower bound, but it ignores that $1 that was in the lower bound. So really what I need to do for these formulas and below is I need to do my upper bound subtracting from the previous upper bound. So let's go ahead and get rid of these. I'll select them using my cursor and just clicking and dragging and hitting delete. Instead, what I want to do is I want to do equal to start my formula. It has a suggestion here. If you hit tab, it will automatically enter C3 minus B3 because it's looking at the cell above and guessing that that's what we want. Unfortunately, as we already saw, that is incorrect. So what we need to instead do is click on C3 and type in subtract and click on C2. And this will correctly calculate the amount of taxes in this bracket. I should note also that what we are seeing is the result of our formula. If you ever need to look at the formula when I'm selecting the cell, the formula bar up here is exactly how you can enter it. If you ever get lost throughout this video and you didn't know how I clicked on things, you can manually enter, and just to prove it to you, you can manually enter C3 minus C2, and it will get you the correct answer. By the way, in terms of capitalization and lowercase letters, you do not need to have the correct capital letters or lowercase letters when you're entering formulas. It is not case sensitive. All right, this formula is ready to be spread down, and there's the one way that we already saw of spreading formulas. You move your cursor to the bottom right of that circle, the cursor changes to the crosshairs, you click and hold down and drag it down to the right area. That's one way of doing it. And by the way, don't drag it down too far. It doesn't want to be dragged down here because this is saying subtract 0 minus 578,000, and the answer is negative 578,000. There is no maximum amount for this last bracket because in theory you could make $1 trillion, you could make $1 quadrillion. There is no upper bound for the last and 7th tax bracket for federal income taxes from 2023. At a future date that might change. Again, the tax brackets throughout history have fluctuated. We used to have 2 tax brackets when it first started, and it fluctuated all the way up to 52 tax brackets, and we come full circle and we're back to 7 tax brackets. So this cell should not have any math. These cells do have the math. You can see them all right here. All right, so now we need to figure out how many taxes we owe if we fill up those tax brackets. If I actually have $11,000 in this tax bracket, I need to have 10%, this tax rate of 10% times that $11,000 for this cell right here. The cool thing about Google Sheets is it does the math for you. Normally by hand, we had to change the decimal place of our 10% to make it 0.10 or just 0.1% and then multiply by our $11,000. Luckily, Google Sheets does that for us, and I'll show you how. To start a formula, again, you type in equal to, and then you're going to click on the maximum money in each bracket, and we're going to do multiply. The multiply key is this star, which is Shift 8. Shift 8 is the multiply, and we're going to multiply by A2. We're just going to simply select A2, and we're going to hit enter. And I'm going to come and hover over that so you can see my formula. And it indeed is $1,100, as we saw in our lesson about tax brackets yesterday. So let's go ahead and see, can we just drag this formula down? Oh, I didn't show you the other way of spreading formulas. Let me do that now. So another way of spreading formulas is to select multiple cells. There's a lot of different ways to select cells. The easiest way is to make sure that your cursor is the arrow, not the hand, not the crosshairs, but the arrow, and just simply click down and drag on the cells that you wish to select. If you do that, then you have the cells selected. Another way of selecting cells is you can click down at the beginning, and you can click down at the end if you hold the shift key. So I want to end in column or in cell E7 again. Column I or row I will never really have anything in it until we start calculating taxes. So I'm going to hold shift, click on E7, and it will select all these cells. Once you have everything selected, a shortcut to spread code down is Command D. If I were to spread code to the right, it would be Command R. R for right, D for down. And now we have the maximum taxes in each of these brackets, and that's only if we fill those complete brackets. So if I make over $50,000, I have filled up one bracket, two brackets, and 50,000 is in between 44,000 and 95,000, so I end up here somewhere. So this is if I add $50,000, it would fill up these two tax brackets. It's now time to start talking about what our income is. So this is a cell that we're going to be editing, so I want to give myself some breathing room. I don't want to edit anything in column F. I want to edit things that are in column G. So this column is reserved for my income tab. So I'm going to say income. And notice, because we already selected row 1 from before and changed all the formatting tools, this income tab is bold, it's horizontally aligned, and it's vertically aligned. It looks really nice. It might be a little bit too big, and we might have to change the size by double clicking up here later, but for now, it's really nice. The problem is there's too much spacing. I don't need that much spacing. I want column F to be a little bit shorter. Yes, I could manually drag this shorter, but I want it at exact length just to practice some more tools. I want it exactly 25 pixels wide. How would I make that exactly 25 pixels wide? Well, make sure that you have column F selected, so select it, and then you can right click anywhere. I think you can even, you have to right click anywhere in your selection. So right click anywhere in your selection. You can right click on F, right click in the selection down here, and on Mac it's a 2-finger click if you have a trackpad, and we want to resize the column. You can already see that resize the column is down here. We're going to click resize the column, and we want exactly 25 pixels. So 25, and we hit enter, or you could set fit to data, which is the equivalent of double clicking on the column divider. So we hit OK, and it is exactly 25 pixels wide. Perfect. So what is our income? Your income depends on your job that I've already assigned. But for the sake of all of us being on the same page, let's pretend that we have a nice income that we can check of $20,000. So I enter 20, 1, 2, 3 zeros, and hit enter. That is 20,000 as a number, but it's not $20,000. I need to format this cell so that it is a money cell, a currency cell. Most of you probably already saw that there's a money button up here, and this is format as currency. If I do that, it won't be correct. If I click on that, it is correct in the fact that it has a money symbol out front, but the problem is it has cents. The majority of everything that you do with filing taxes are always rounded to the nearest dollar. So there is another way of rounding to the nearest dollar, and there's actually two ways of doing this. Let me show you both of them. One way is by just simply saying decrease the decimal places. Click it once, click it again, and now it's rounded to the nearest dollar. There's a second way, and a much faster way of doing that, I think, which is you come to the 1, 2, 3 formats and you come to currency rounded, and that will make it rounded as well. So there's the two different ways of having rounded currency. So let's assume our income is $20,000. So what we want to do here is we want to insert some rows. This is something that I forgot to cover in class, but I want to cover in this video. I need 2 additional rows in between E and F. So how do I do that? I select row F, and I'm going to 2-finger click or right click, and I want to insert a column on the right. This is different than inserting a column on the left, as opposed, like you could have said, oh, I want to insert a column on the left of G. If you did that, it would match the column that you're selecting. If I insert left from column G, it will only make a very tiny column, but I wanted a large column. There also is a way to increase or to insert multiple columns at a time, and that depends on how many columns you selected. If I select 2 columns at a time and right click to insert, it will change to insert 2 columns to the right, which is what I wanted to do. In these columns, this is what we're going to fill in our tax brackets with. So this is going to be labeled My Money. And this one is going to be titled My Taxes. So we're going to figure out how much of our money, how much of our income of $20,000 goes into this first tax bracket on row 2, and et cetera, et cetera. It will eventually flow like an ice cube tray until it runs out of money, and then you'll end at whatever tax bracket you're in. And then after we do that, we will calculate how many taxes we pay on our money that is in that tax bracket by multiplying this money by the tax rate. And we will find our taxes, and at the very end, we will add up all of our taxes, and we'll enter it here for my sum of taxes. So you'll call this total taxes. We'll do that right now. That is the very final step. And we might as well do this before I forget. We want our tax, we'll say my tax percent, to figure out what is that percent. So let's go ahead and figure out this hardest column. Column F in this project is by far the hardest column because it's a lot of code. It's not a simple code of do a subtraction problem right here, do a multiplication problem. It uses a nested if statement. Let me show you how to get started. The best way to explain this is as simple as possible and then talk about your mistakes. I am purposely in this video going to make about 4 mistakes. In column F, I'm going to make 3 mistakes on purpose. Here we go. In column F, I simply want to have my money, which should be between $0,000 and $11,000. I should never have an amount of money that is over $11,000 because that exceeds my upper bound. So in here, I'm just simply going to type in an equal to sign to start off my formula. From here, I'm going to do an if statement. An if statement is IF. It can be capitalized, it can be lowercase, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna do lowercase because I don't like leaving my caps lock button on. Although for this entire project, you basically can do that aside from the header or the header row. All right, so I'm gonna do an if statement. As soon as I hit Shift 9 and enter my parentheses, it says, okay, I know what you're about to do. Normally, it does not show you all this information about an if statement. Normally, it has just a question mark. If you do not know what your function does, you click on the question mark and it will expand to what the 3 things are. So the way that the if statement works is it'll check some sort of expression. This expression will be one of 2 things. It will be true or it will be false. Let me give you an example in a sec, and then I'll do our actual code after that. So it will take in an expression that is true or false, and it will output one of 2 things. It will either output this value, if it's true, if this expression is true, it'll output this value, and if this expression is false, it'll output that value. There's 2 possible outputs. Essentially what we want to do is we want to say, hey, if we're between $0 and $11,000, then just put the income. If we are above $11,000, we've filled up the tax bracket, and we just want this maximum tax bracket amount. So let me give you a simple example just to make sure that you understand the if statement, then I'll do our code. Let's check. Is this number greater than $20,000? And that is truly false. 11,000 is not bigger than 20,000. So this statement that I've typed in here, this logical expression, is false, which means if I do a comma, let's say it's true. If it's true, I'll say, cool, it's true. And then comma, the value is false, I will do maybe a sad face or a slanty face. And then I'll end my parentheses and hit enter. So it's a slanty face because this was a false statement. But what if this value was above 20,000? Watch this. I'm going to change this to 25,000, and this should automatically change to cool, it's true. So let's change this to 20,000. And now, it has to be a little bit above that. So let me change it to 20,001. And now it is above 20,000, so it says cool, it's true. So I want to undo all of that. That was just for the sake of explaining how an if statement works. Let's do our if statement. So this is going to be equal to an if statement with our parentheses. And what we want to check is, do we exceed the maximum amount of this tax bracket? Because if we exceed it, that means we've filled it up. And we should just output we filled up our upper bound. So we just use this maximum money and output that. So check. Is our income, check. Is our income, click on I2, is this income greater than or equal to our upper bound? So click on our upper bound. That is our logical expression. If we are bigger than our upper bound, that means we've filled up the tax bracket, comma. If we have filled up the tax bracket, the true value is just use the maximum money then. We filled it up. This is the maximum money if it's filled up. We click on D2 and it types in D2 for us, comma. But if it's not true, that means that we had an income that was under $11,000. Maybe we had an income of $5,000 and we were not able to fill up this tax bracket. If we had an income of $5,000, essentially what we want to do is we want to take our income and subtract our lower bound. I know that feels pedantic. Why do we need to subtract 0? Well, in your custom tax brackets, this money might not be 0. It might be $123. It might be something else, right? So if it's false, we need to take our income, click on I2, and we need to subtract the lower bound. Come over here and subtract the lower bound and hit enter. I think enter will work and it will automatically end this parentheses for us. We don't actually have to type that last parenthesis. So check out our code. We are well above $11,000, so it just said, hey, you fill up the tax bracket, you get the max tax bracket. If we are under that, let's type in $5,000. What should theoretically happen if I hit enter is this will be exactly $5,000. I hit enter. And if I change this lower bound to some other number, it will automatically do that subtraction, which I don't need to do. I'm just going to undo a bunch of times. That is me checking to make sure that our code works. However, this code is not spreadable. The reason for that is eventually there's going to be a problem down here when we try to figure out how much money is in our tax bracket. Remember that this tax bracket was not calculated by doing right minus left. In a similar way, this one will not be just doing right minus left. We will need to do our upper bound subtracting the previous upper bound, which is what this code says. This code says take C3 and subtract C2. So we need to retype our code, and hopefully this cell will be spreadable and we'll be able to spread it all the way down to F9. In this cell, we are going to do our if statement. If, start your parentheses, shift 9. What we need to do is check to make sure if we filled up the cell, we output correctly. So how do we check to see if we filled up the cell? We need to check, is our income bigger than the upper bound? Is it greater than or equal to our upper bound? Because if it is, it filled up our bracket. If this is saying, is this overflowing? If it is overflowing, comma, then we're going to output the maximum money in each bracket, just like we did before. Nothing has changed from the previous cell. Here's the distinction now, comma. If it does overflow, then we need, or if it doesn't overflow, this is where we are now. If it's false, if we did not overflow, that means we are false. We need to do a subtraction problem. That means it's like, maybe we have, in our case, $20,000. Maybe we have an amount of money that is in between our lower and upper bound. If that is the case, we need to do our income subtract the previous upper bound, as opposed to subtract the number on the left. So we need to take our income, click, and we need to subtract the previous upper bound. We do not click on B3 here, we click on C2 and hit enter. This should now work. Check it out. If I add up all of our money, 11,000 plus 9,000 is $20,000. It has split this up correctly. And if I come back down here and enter 5,000, it only, oh, there's a mistake. And this is one of the 3 mistakes that's gonna be made in column F. Specifically in this line, there are 2 mistakes that we need to fix. So I'm gonna hit Command Z and show you what those mistakes are. The first mistake is this. We need to check to make sure that we are pulling from the right income. So I'm going to come here and hit enter. What we should have been doing, and that's actually not the first mistake. That'll be the second mistake. The first mistake is we've never checked to see if we're checking the lower bound. The lower bound is $11,000, and when we typed in $5,000 here, $5,000, we never checked to make sure we were actually in the second tax bracket. All we were doing is making sure there wasn't overflow. 5,000 does not overflow over $44,000. That is a true statement. So that's all we've checked. What we now need to check is to make sure that we are actually at our lower bound. So what we need to do here is we need to add a condition, an if statement, to make sure that we are checking our lower bound. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select all of this code except for the equal to sign. And I'm going to hit Command X. Command X is a cut. That allows us to get rid of it. It's the same thing as Command C and delete at the same time. And I can Command V this, Command V this, Command V this over and over as many times as I want. I don't want to do that though. I just want to have my equal to. So I'm ready to Command V, but I'm not going to do that. I just have my equal to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do an if statement. If I want to check to make sure our income, click on our income, is our income above this threshold? Is it greater than the previous upper bound? Is this greater than our previous upper bound? So I'm going to click on our upper bound. We don't need a greater than or equal to sign. We just need a greater than symbol. If it is bigger than the upper bound, then we have permission to do the previous code, comma. Then we have permission. I'm just going to hit paste. Use the previous code, comma. And if it's false, then we want it to be blank. We don't want anything to happen down here if we're not in the correct cell. So in order to say be blank, you do quote, quote. You do the quotation double, and that means blank cell, and then we hit enter. And notice nothing is there, even though we have code there. If I select F3, you can see in the code, I think it's called the formula bar, sorry. The formula bar has a formula in it, even though this value is blank. And now if I were to enter some bigger number, like 20,000, now this formula, it appears from thin air, from magic. So that's kind of cool, right? Command Z, and it looks like nothing is there. Command Shift Z, go forward, and it is there. Pretty nice. That was the first of the 2 mistakes that were made in this cell. Here's the second mistake. It's not spreadable. Watch this. If I drag this down, bad things happen. Let's enter a bigger number here so you can actually see those bad things though. Let's try 100. 1, 2, 3, 1,000. Something should be there, and they're not there. Where's the money? $100,000. These 2 do not add up to $100,000. Where is that money? That's the mistake. Well, there's a problem, and I'll show you that problem by hitting enter on this first mistake. If I hit enter, you'll notice that it's pulling from C3. Everything about this is correct up until it says, hey, you're using I3. It used to be I2 and now it's I3. Look at this formula bar. Stare at this I3. And I'm going to go up and down. It was I2 and then it was I3. Everything has incremented in terms of a number. And that's what happens when you spread down a formula. Back over here, when we spread down this formula, C3 changed to C4, which changed to C5, which changed to C6. When you spread a formula down, what it's doing is it's essentially incrementing this number. What we want it to do is to not increment that number. So here's how you do that. To not increment a number, you put a money symbol in front of the number that normally increments. So I'm going to put a money symbol in front of that I money 2. I have to do it to all of the I money 2. So it's I money 2, I money 2, and it will not change the 2. If I hit enter, I will be able to spread that code and it will now work. Notice the difference between these two cells. One of them has a money symbol, one of them doesn't. So I'm going to spread down this code and check it out. Now it seems to be working. I can enter in another 0 and we can see everything is in working order, more or less. The spreadable code is now spreadable. As a note, if you want the code to spread to the right as well, you want to make sure that the letter doesn't change. So notice that I2 changed to J2. If you want the letter to not change, you need another money symbol in front of the I to make the letter not change. Since we're spreading our formula down instead of to the right, we don't care about this, so this is perfectly acceptable. We don't need to change anything about our formula. So there is one final mistake in column F, and it's hard to see. Notice that each of these has a formula in it, but one of these is blank. If I have an income of $1 million, it should be going into the 7th and last tax bracket, which doesn't have any maximum. Before, I told you there should be money in that 7th tax bracket if you're over $578,126. Well, we are definitely over the $578,000 limit, so we should have money in this tax bracket. Indeed, if you add up all of this money, it should add up to $1 million, and right now, it doesn't. And that's because we made a final mistake. This, by the way, is where we left off in class in the year 2023. This is where we need to fix our mistake. Right now, if I hit enter, it will show you color-coded where we're pulling from. This orange color refers to that orange color. This, I'm colorblind, but that color refers to another color over there. What we're essentially saying is this income underneath this upper bound? So what I'm asking is 1 million less than this upper bound? In essence, is 1 million less than 0? And the answer is no. 1 million is not less than 0. So we need to completely ignore the fact that we have an upper bound. So over here, where we have our money, we need to ignore our upper bound by getting rid of the D8. Get rid of the D8 and just say, hey, if you are bigger than it, then just enter it. And if you're not bigger than it, comma, just enter a blank cell and hit enter. Now it works. Everything about this works in column F. So if I come over here and enter $20, $20 goes into the first tax bracket. If I enter $20,000, that goes into the second tax bracket. If I go, what's in this third tax bracket? Like $50,000, we go into that third tax bracket. That works. Over $100,000, we go into the next tax bracket. Let's go to $100,000. Goes into the next tax bracket, et cetera, and it can go all the way to 1 million, and that goes to the very last tax bracket. So that was the hardest thing that we had to do today. All of this code right here is now automatically filling our income into the correct tax bracket. And if you do add up these numbers, it does add up to 1 million. If you want to just do a sanity check here to make sure it does indeed add up, you can do a sum, you can do an equal to, sum, and then you can, the auto suggestion here is correct, so I'm going to hit tab to autocomplete. And indeed, the sum of all of those numbers does add up to 1 million, so it is correct. I'm going to delete that. That was just to check my code. The rest of this is going to be pretty straightforward. There's going to be one more mistake that I'll make on purpose. Here we go. Taxes. So we need to figure out how much in taxes we pay on this money. This is the amount of money that is in this tax bracket. We're going to take this money, multiply it by this percent, and get our taxes. So we're going to do an equal to in G2, and we're going to say our money times, which is shift 8, our tax rate, and call it done. And that works, and it's spreadable. Like if I come down, here I'll use the other way of selecting. I'm going to hold shift and click on this bottom cell and hit command D. It spreads. It works. Everything about that seems to be working. But I've made my last and final purposeful mistake today. What happens if I change my income to something small, like $10,000? Then there's a bunch of zeros there, and that doesn't look very nice. It's correct, but it doesn't look very nice. Is there a way to somehow hide those zeros? And indeed, there is. And here's how you do it. I'm going to click on G2, even though G2 is beautiful and perfect. And I'm going to say, if we even have anything in money, if I'm going to take a look to the cell to the left. If that cell to the left is blank, then I also want to be blank. If the cell to the left has money in it, like I do when I have $20,000, if it has money in it, then I'll output the correct answer. And here's how you do that with code. I'm going to select the F2 times A2. I'm going to hit Command X to cut it, and I'm going to do an if statement. My if statement will say, if there's a number over here, I'm just going to click on the number to the left. If there's a number over there, comma, then I'm going to output the correct answer. But if there is no number, comma, if it's false, if I have no number over there, put a blank, do double quotes, hit enter. And now I'm going to spread this code down and hit Command D, and it works. Check it out. If I enter $20,000, it has my taxes correctly. If I enter $1 million, then everything appears there. Now everything is working correctly. Finally, and I'm not going to make any mistakes from here on out, I hope, but I am human. I do make mistakes. From here, we need to calculate what all of these taxes add up to, and that's using the sum command, which I did down here to check my work, and I'm going to do down here right now. In J2, in this cell, I'm going to do equal to the sum command, which is going to add up a bunch of things. I'm going to start my parentheses, and I'm going to click down and drag on all of these potential cells, G2 through G8. This colon means through, so G2 through G8, and I'm going to end my parentheses. You don't really need to, you can just hit enter, and it will add up all of your taxes for you. Just to do a sanity check, let's enter 10,000, 10, 1, 2, 3, and it should be my taxes. I owe $1,000. If I put, let's do 20,000 because that's a nice easy number. 1,100 plus 1,080 adds up to 2,180. And check it out. You can actually verify this by comparing this number for total taxes with this income to example 1 from yesterday's lesson. And the other example was $100,000. If I enter $100,000, we can check from yesterday's presentation as well. Oop, that was a million. Too many zeros. Let's get rid of one. We get 17,400. This was the number that we had from yesterday's presentation. So everything here is working correctly. I'm going to do one extra thing in terms of a calculation, and then I'm going to format everything, and then we'll be done. So I want to figure out, what is my actual tax percentage? What is the number of percentage if I divide total taxes divided by income? And to do that, I'm going to do equal to total taxes divided by, which is the question mark symbol for that slash there, forward slash, as opposed to backslash, which is above the return key or to the right of the right bracket key. You're going to divide that by your income and hit enter. Right now, that is not a percent, it's a decimal. So you're just going to go to your formatting tab and come up here to format as a percent, and you have your tax percent. All right. We are now done with all of the calculations and entering of numbers. Everything from here on out is going to be formatting, making sure this thing looks nice. First and foremost, I could have up to $1 million here. So I'm going to make things, I'm going to max them out and make sure everything isn't too skinny, because I'll show you a possible thing that could happen that's bad. I only have $1,000. If you double click right here and format it as $1,000 and come back here and try to enter a bunch of zeros here, I can't see all of those zeros. So I'm going to make sure that I format this with a bunch of zeros, and that's going to be the correct size. In fact, I'm going to select everything either by hitting Command A or by clicking the top left, and I'm going to double click one of the borders, and it will automatically resize all of my tabs, or all of my columns rather. Next, I want to make sure that my sheet down here, I don't want this to say sheet 1, I want this to say federal. So I'm going to double click and type federal and hit enter. Because I'm going to have two other tabs. I'm going to have state and then an overview tab in order to make sure that I have everything in one simple spreadsheet. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is, I have too many columns. Look at all these columns. This looks gross. I don't need those columns. I want to delete those columns. The way that I do that is I select column L by clicking on the L. On your keyboard, Command, Shift, and then right arrow key to select all of the columns to the right, and then I'm going to two finger or right finger click, and I'm going to delete those columns. They're not there anymore. I don't need them. Same thing for all these rows. All of these rows down here, I don't need. Your tax brackets, your custom tax brackets, you might have a bunch of extra tax brackets, so give yourself some room. Maybe from 16 on down, I don't need. Maybe from 14 on down, I don't need. For me, I'm just going to say 16 on down. So I'm going to select row 16 by clicking on 16, Command Shift down to select all the way down to row 1000, and I'm going to two finger or right finger click, and I'm going to delete those rows. And now I can't even use the two finger drag up or down. I can't scroll left or right, can't scroll up or down because I don't even have any cells over there. All right, I want to color code things to make them look pretty. And here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to select everything by hitting either Command A or by clicking on the top left. When I select everything, I'm going to change the coloring. I'm going to make them alternate coloring. Because remember, over here, those look pretty. I want to make these also look pretty. The way that I do that is I'm going to click on the Fill Color tab, come down to, not conditional, to alternating colors, and it will bring up this interface. I want my header column to look dark red. I think that'll be, you don't have to do dark red. You can do whatever color you want. I like dark red. And I want the first color to be white, which it already is, and the next color to be gray. This gray is a little bit too light. I want a darker gray. I want the one right above this light blue. That looks really good to me. And I'm gonna hit done. That's looking pretty good, except for the fact that this text is a little bit hard to read. It's a dark color on another dark color. It's easier to read light on dark or dark on light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of row 1 to select everything up here. I'm going to come up here to the text color and I'm going to change it to white. And now it's much easier for my eyes to read that. And I am now done with this project. You can check it out and make sure that this is actually working for you. Check for $1 million. Do you get $330 or $330,000, 332? I keep saying that wrong. $330,332 at a tax rate of 33.03%. What if you enter $123,000? Do you get $17,400? Does it look like this? If you enter $20,123, does it look like this? And just to make sure that I have some separation, this barrier here, I want it to be an actual barrier. I'm going to color code this. I'm going to override the alternate color. I'm just going to make all this black to give myself some awareness of here's all the critical info. Here's how it was calculated. And this is now done. Please leave this on 20,000. Actually, for me and Miss Sandy to check this, please leave this on 1 million, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. 1 million so that we can check that all of your tax brackets are correctly working, and then this is how you should leave it when you turn it in for tomorrow. Make sure that you are not submitting submit on this one because we still need to edit this. We need to add a state tab. We need to add an overview tab. Do not hit submit because you will not be able to edit the Google Sheets. And with that, I am finally done with the video. Thank you for watching.